Are you looking to sharpen your skills, boost productivity, or take your career to the next level? The IISE Training Center offers world-class professional development built for busy engineers, managers, and problem solvers. Whether you're diving into analytics, earning a Lean Six Sigma certification, or exploring supply chain logistics, our expert-led courses deliver practical tools with real results. Learn online or in person with options tailored to every career stage. Plus, our training works. Past participants have applied their knowledge to save their companies over $250 million in real-world projects, and 90% of Lean Six Sigma candidates pass their exam on the first try. Visit iise.org/training to explore the full course catalog and start transforming your career today.
Here's the problem. Much of the world around us, from workplaces to products to public spaces, was never designed with everyone in mind. That oversight can create barriers, limit performance, and even put people at risk. But there's a better way: universal design. And when applied through ergonomics and human factors, it doesn't just include more people, it sparks innovation that benefits us all.
When you design for full accessibility or for those with a specific impairment, you often create solutions that benefit everyone.
In this episode of Problem Solved, we sit down with two leaders in the field. Bobbie Watts, past president of IISE's Applied Ergonomics Society, and Anuja Patil, current president. Together, they'll show us how universal design principles are reshaping work, healthcare, and technology, and why solving for one often benefits many.
Hey, and welcome. My name is Bobbie Watts, and with me is Anuja Patil. Anuja is the Risk Control Product and Industry Consulting Director at CNA Insurance, where she leads strategic initiatives focused on workplace safety, ergonomics, and operational risk. With deep expertise across industrial and in healthcare sectors, Anuja champions the integration of universal design principles to enhance performance, reduce injuries, and support workforce sustainability. She was recently featured in CNA's The Edge of Risk podcast, where she shared insights on how inclusive design and emerging technologies like AI are reshaping the future of work. She is also currently serving as the president of IISE's Applied Ergonomics Society.
Thank you, Bobbie, for the intro. Now let me return the favor. Bobbie Watts is a human factors and ergonomics expert with over 28 years of experience across industry and innovation. She holds degrees in industrial and systems engineering from Clemson and Auburn University. Bobbie has led ergonomics and human-centered design efforts at organizations including UPS, the USPS, and Coca-Cola. In addition to her corporate role as an innovation initiative leader at Michelin, she continues to practice as a professional ergonomics consultant and is the author of Ergonomics and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Practice and Theory, which was very recently released, where she explores the role of ergonomists as leaders in innovation. And she is the past president of Applied Ergonomics Society with IISE. So, Bobbie, thank you for being here with us on this podcast.
I'm glad to be here.
Let's start by talking about universal design. What does that mean? And, we were talking about this earlier, right? When we were kind of brainstorming about the podcast, I want our listeners to know more about Ron Mace. So can you tell us a little bit more about, Ron Mace as well as universal design and concepts of universal design?
So sure. And I'll start with a quick history lesson. So believe it or not, automatic doors that we're so used to seeing has been around for some time in some form since the 1st century AD. They were powered by things like heat, air, pressure, and pulleys. But the sliding doors that we see, like the ones at the grocery stores, really took off in the 60s and 70s, thanks to accessibility standards like the American National Standards Institute, otherwise known as ANSI, with their barrier-free guidelines, and later the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA standards for accessible design. They were originally designed to remove barriers for people with disabilities, but now they help just about everyone, whether it's parents with strollers, as you know, delivery drivers. So my past with UPS, I'm very familiar with that, and people juggling a tray of coffees or just a lot of groceries. So you name it, it's going to help everybody, or it's helping everybody.
I have had my share of coffee spills, so I do appreciate those.
Well, I'm glad you appreciate it, because as this automatic door story hinted, it's all about creating spaces and products that work for as many people as possible and not just a select few. So the term itself was coined by Ronald Mace, or Ron Mace, and he was an architect, educator, and product designer who used a wheelchair for most of his life after he contracted polio as a child. It was through his mobility experience with his wheelchair that he saw the barriers in everyday environments firsthand, and he made it his mission to design those barriers out. So, working with colleagues at the North Carolina State University, he helped to turn that idea into what we call universal design.
That's a great story. And I mean, this has been very educational for me, because as much as I knew about universal design, the origin of it, and Ron Mace's story, absolutely really enlightening there.
Yeah, so it gives some of that background, really shows the importance of what universal design, how it came about, and why it's so important today. So when we talk about universal design, there are a set of principles, 7 to be exact, that if we follow those will help us to ensure that when we design things, the most amount of people can access it or utilize it, be it public spaces, products, or services.
Awesome. Tell us more about these 7 principles of universal design, Bobbie.
So I will do that very quickly. You can learn more when you go to the College of Design, NC State College of Design, and it goes into a little more for each one of those. But the first one is equitable use, meaning the design is useful to people with diverse abilities.
Okay.
The second one is flexibility in use. So it accommodates different preferences and abilities.
Like lefties and righties?
Yes. So whether you're left hand, right hand, what have you, whether it's a preference or your ability, that design should be flexible enough for you. So the third one is simple and intuitive to use. The fourth one is perceptible information, and that is when the design communicates information effectively regardless of ambient conditions in the environment or the user's sensory abilities.
Oh, like good signage that works whether you hear the announcements or not, right?
Absolutely. And I love a good wayfinding sign, especially when you go to the airport, because everything's going on. But I'll digress. I digress on that.
As you are running to catch a flight, and you're a last minute warrior like me. So yeah, definitely, those signages which are clear and have the visual information that you can process quickly.
And that's not always the case. And I'm looking at you, Egan International Airport. But again, that is a separate story. So the fifth one is tolerance for error. The sixth is low physical effort. And for all of those physical ergonomists out there, your heart should do a little pitter patter when we talk about that low physical effort. And then the final one, the seventh one, is size and space for approach in use.
Sounds pretty reasonable, right?
Mm-hmm.
But our listeners might be wondering, why wouldn't you just design things that way to begin with?
It does sound reasonable, and that is the $1 million question. So let me tell you something about what we call the curb cut effect. So I talked earlier about automatic sliding doors and how they're so ubiquitous these days and how they are useful to so many different people with different needs. So those little ramps that you see where the sidewalk meets the street?
Yeah, curb cuts.
Yeah, exactly. Curb cuts. So like automated doors, these curb cuts, they became a focal point of disability rights activism for accessibility. So with them becoming mandated in the various governmental design standards for public use. And it was that broad use of those curb cuts by so many people with different needs, again, people with strollers, hand trucks, luggage, that the term curb cut effect, which is very hard to say, was coined. So the curb cut effect refers to use of design regardless of a person's specific needs. So in essence, that is universal design. So that has expanded into the thought. So it is a concept or thought that when you design for full accessibility or for those with a specific impairment, you often create solutions that benefit everyone.
I love this. Can you give us more examples? I know we love hearing examples.
Oh yeah. I love talking about them. I mean, I know I can go on and on. So I talk a lot if you don't know that. But yeah, there are tons of other examples. We can see that today when we talk about text messaging, closed captioning with the remote control, voice activation, all things that I use almost on a daily basis, especially as I get older. And all of these things are assistive technology innovations that target specific impairments. And they now have a very broad usage. So you can see how universal design principles can drive not only innovation, but disruptive innovation. Yeah, so even though there's so many great examples, or should I say, in spite of so many good examples, we still have a long way to go as a global society to make our environments, products, services, experiences, all the things that we design to be more inclusive. So I talked a lot about universal design in public spaces, but what about other environments like the workplace, which is the scope of most of the engineers listening? So people often picture office settings when we talk about design, but this applies across all industries. So can you break it down for us, Anuja, what UD means for the workplace?
Absolutely. So in offices, universal design might look like, adjustable desks and ergonomic seating so people of all statures can work comfortably. We might see, you talked about some of this too, but in the work setting, this carries real-time captioning in virtual meetings, which helps people, not only people with hearing loss, but also when you're working in a noisy space or in different languages. I know post-COVID, a lot of us coming back to shared offices. So it's pretty loud. So it's nice to have those closed captioning available, not only in virtual meetings, but even things like PowerPoint, where the closed captioning is available and you can understand better with a lot of stimuli going around you. Software design for different working styles. For example, colorblind friendly dashboards or keyboard shortcuts for people who don't use a mouse or cannot use a mouse, either due to pain, discomfort, or a certain disability. But when you move into industrial environments, universal design gets even more crucial, in my opinion. Think about height adjustable workbenches that reduce strain for both shorter and taller workers. For me, as ergonomists, it's probably one of the most important things we look for is adjustability, not just to be able to accommodate people, but the task that is being performed. So if there's a precision task, ability to have the workstation a little bit higher does make a big difference. So having these versatile workspaces allows for more tasks, and you have the line being more flexible, so you can move things around depending on what's being made. So you do get a lot more bang for your buck by having flexible workstations in place. Power tools that are designed for ambidextrous control. So left-handed and right-handed workers can use them safely, especially if the tools are being shared. It's good to have those controls in place. Lightweight exoskeletons that can reduce fatigue in repetitive of heavy lifting tasks, right? If you are using assistive devices like exoskeletons, a larger amount of the population can do the work, which is always good because our pool of people we can bring into the workforce increases. Smart helmets with built-in lighting and augmented reality overlays for real-time hazard recognition. We are seeing things like that. It's no longer something that we saw in the future. It's come in, and it does allow a lot more people to be able to be brought up to speed faster, get them trained faster. And it all lies, and all these innovations have come into pictures using those principles of universal design, right?
A lot of great examples. And a lot of times people think about universal design, they do just think about architecture or buildings or public spaces. You gave a lot of great examples of how it applies in the workplace. And another thing is that a lot of people don't think that as ergonomists that we're not designers. We absolutely are. We're designing pretty much everything, the system, the work, all of that. So we need to take that into account. So a lot of powerful examples. and the impact of these changes. What does the data tell us about it?
Well, the numbers are striking, right? We've seen this, any engineer or safety professional or ergonomist has seen that ergonomic interventions that are designed with the population into consideration, that allows for better use. You see a reduction in musculoskeletal disorders, cut lost work days, decreased staff turnover. In fact, the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors found that MSD is reduced by 60%, work days reduced, work cut loss by 88%, staff turnover to about 80%. So we see that these things matter. Now put this against the labor landscape. In 2025 alone, 4.18 million Americans reached the retirement age. That's about 11,400 people every single day. Meanwhile, manufacturing alone faces a shortage of over 600,000 workers. So universal design is not just about accessibility at this point. It's a workforce strategy. It helps extend careers, reduce injuries, and makes jobs more attractive for a more diverse pool of workers. We want more people to come into the workforce.
Again, that is very powerful, and it really speaks to, as ergonomists, the value that we bring, especially when we're utilizing universal design principles. So you have a lot of experience, and we talked about that in the introduction. So can you give us a real world story or where you've seen this play out?
Yeah, throughout my career, we've seen this happen where we have started as an accessibility project and ended up being a competitive advantage. So a company that I worked with in the past redesigned its assembly line stations. They added adjustable platforms, lighter hand tools, visual prompts, and within a year, they reported about 40% reduction in injury. Productivity went up, turnover in the area dropped significantly. So, really gave that company a competitive advantage to be able to hire more, keep their people longer, so on and so forth.
Again, it just really speaks to the value that we bring to our organization. So let's just do a quick pivot. So you do have a lot of experience in the healthcare arena. So, and when you think about healthcare, this is a sector where design literally affects life or death. So what does universal design look like there?
Yeah, we're not just talking healthcare like what we traditionally think healthcare in hospital settings, right? You're talking healthcare in like smaller clinics, even material handling that is being done in various industrial manufacturing environment that support healthcare. So for patients, all of this does have a big impact on the patients. You have wider doorways and zero threshold showers, things like that make recovery rooms easier to navigate to after surgery. As someone who has had the pleasure of visiting hospital and being in recovery rooms, I can tell you, walking into that room with IV attached to you and not having to worry about taking a step is a big, big, big thumbs up for me. Then color-coded signage reducing confusion, especially for older patients or those with cognitive challenges. And color coding signages, this is not just a healthcare issue or a healthcare universal design application. We see this across industries. Bobbie, you talked about airports, right? But like in manufacturing too, like being able to like identify danger, things like that, color-coded signage helps reduce a lot of that confusion. Medication packaging with tactile cues, large digital displays to help prevent dosage errors, all examples. But like then think about, workers in these settings, the workers who support these businesses, they have some of the highest injury rates across all industries. And universal design is a form of protection. So you're thinking ceiling mounted lifts to prevent back injuries when moving patients, adjustable exam tables, imaging equipment reducing repetitive strain, customizable dashboard in electric healthcare records that can cut fatigue and allow faster and safer care delivery.
So, and I was just going to say, you talked about not only the patient experience, but the worker experience. So again, it goes back to what we're designing in terms of, it's not just the workplace, it's the experience that goes along with it. So in those examples, can you talk about some of the outcomes?
I mean, it's a win-win, like you said, right? Patient engagement and adherence will improve. Stress will go down because, it's a high stress environment. We all agree that. And the care outcomes improve. At the same time, it protects the workforce. Nursing alone accounts for nearly 1 in 4 workplace injuries in healthcare. Think about that, right? Almost every nurse knows a colleague who's been injured on the job. One hospital that I worked with in previous jobs implemented universal patient lifts across multiple units. And within the first year, the staff reported a significant drop in back strains and sprains. Staff satisfaction also improved because workers felt valued and safe, right? That's the power of design, or good design, rather.
Yeah.
So, Bobbie, let's switch gears, Ram. Let's talk about universal design principle being used in product design. What can you tell us about this? Because you are the guru that I know in product design and ergonomics. So tell us more.
Yeah, so that's actually how I got started in ergonomics and human factors. I was, in that product design space, very fascinated about it. Again, I can go into, for anybody who has any questions, I can go on for days about some of my history, but let's talk about one really good example. Those, I think it's OXO or OXO good grips utensils.
Yeah.
You've seen those before, right? The one with the comfort handles and it has that really good friction grip.
Yep, I have.
So those are really good examples of the use of universal design in product design. So you would think of when we're talking about kitchen tools, they would already be designed for everyone since it's so many different people use them, but that hasn't always been the case. And we still see that today. You can just ask anyone with arthritis who's tried to use those old-timey, old-school can openers.
Oh,
And
no.
I know. So, and that's actually what sparked the idea for those good grips, those OXO good grips. So the inventor, Sam Farber, I hope I'm saying his name correctly. If not, sorry. But he saw his wife's name was Betsy. She was struggling with standard kitchen tools due to her arthritis. So he saw that challenge and he said, there's got to be a better way. So he teamed up with a design firm to create better handles. And these handles were ones with soft contour grips inspired. If you think about the bike handlebars, especially if you had one when you were a child, that good grip because you don't want to lose that contact. So if you think about those bike handlebars, that's what he was going with the new design of the utensils. So he found that when he did that and he gave that to her, they were easier for her to use. But it turns out that they worked not only for her and her particular ailment or impairment, it worked better for everyone, especially those with limited or impaired upper extremity mobility. And so that is actually very key to focus in on. So while this was especially better for anyone with those type of impairments, it wasn't just for them. And that is the key for design. It needs to be universal. And that's the power of universal design principles, because if you solve for one, you benefit many.
I love that. Solve for one and benefit many.
This is where my passion lies, because when we're designing things, again, whether it's workplaces, spaces, products, or experiences, we're doing it because we want to improve quality of life. It also goes to show that universal design or ergonomics, while we're at it, is just good business sense. So what business idea out there would you not want to have as many users or customers as possible? So other examples of where you can see the utilization of those universal design principles would include, you spoke about it a little bit earlier, about ambidextrous scissors, or even looking at designing scissors in a different way where you're not having to use the digits, but you can utilize the palm of your hand. And you do that because you don't have to utilize or have those finer motions or fingers if that is a challenge for you. Of course, you talked about adjustable stand desks, easy open binders. So you think about those trapper keepers and not those the jaws of life where you had to try to pull it apart and pray to God you didn't get your finger caught in it. And I think I still have.
You gotta be quick.
I know. I think I still have some scarring from it, but and you'll start to see some trends when I talk about these other examples like walk-in showers or recliners with lift assist or lever style handles. Again, I'm getting older, so those things are becoming more important to me. But again, it speaks to a broader audience that can utilize these designs. So, and we can go on and on about those other some other examples of utilizing universal design. But the bottom line, good design is simply design that works for the wide range of real human needs and abilities. So, and when we follow those universal design principles, along with engaging with end users every step of the way, it's very important to have that user-centered focus. We can help to ensure that design is, as you mentioned, good design.
Right.
So let's look ahead as we start to wrap this up. Let's look ahead at technology and AI. So AI, you're hearing it every single day. And honestly, it is changing how we are doing work. So how does universal design fit into this future?
Yeah, I'm so excited. AI has incredible potential to supercharge universal design. So many examples, right? Real-time translation and captioning in dozen languages, helping global teams collaborated. I mean, today, when we listen to this podcast in the future, this probably might not seem like a big deal, but we have the new generation of AirPods that can do real-time translation. This week, we know that. We have the new Ray-Ban Meta sunglasses that can overlay information in front of you and translate conversations that are happening in front of us. Like, imagine how amazing that is and what that means for work, right? And how global teams collaborate. AI-driven posture detection via different motion captures, giving worker nudges to correct movements before injuries occur. Adaptive exoskeletons are in the future that adjust to the worker's movement in real time. Hazard alerts delivered simultaneously through, sound, vibration. So, you have different kind of feedbacks, haptic feedback, as well as visual cues, ensuring everyone gets the warning regardless of their sensory ability, right? AI allows us to put in a lot more redundancies than we usually would have. So we capture a larger population. That design is helping us do that.
So do we know how effective this is already?
I mean, I'm pretty sure not only me, but you as well as people on the call, we are seeing AI in the workplace in many different capacities for safety, for ergonomics, for risk management. I think the one we are most familiar with is the use of motion capture technologies to help find risks and solutions. There's so many on the market at this point in time, and they get better and better at detecting the risk and also giving you solution hints. But also think about predictive analytics and using them to anticipate upcoming risk. Predictive analytics and machine learning are transforming industrial safety by shifting the paradigm from reactive to proactive risk management, right? We always say, look at this leading indicator, right? Well, now we can do this in real time and really see the impact of it happening in front of our eyes.
Yeah, honestly, it's a game changer. It allows us as ergonomists to put our energies in, like you mentioned, the solution development, and also utilize AI for that. But are there any risks that you think we should be mindful of?
Yeah, there are. But before, I wanted to give one more example before we talked about risk, because this ties in with that. So we have AI-powered cameras that detect PPE adherence, unsafe behaviors, and also restricted area violations in real time. So all these things, there are definitely some risks, right? And that's where we design them out. So if AI isn't designed with usability in mind, it can exclude. For example, voice command systems that don't recognize accented speech, like mine.
And mine, my Southern accent.
Or tools that fail in noisy construction environments could actually increase the risk, right? So if you've incorporated voice command systems within like safety critical equipment, you gotta like be aware that, what is the consequence of this failing and how can you design that out? That's why safety and ergonomics professionals must be at the table when these technologies are being developed, deployed, and being kind of considered for your plants, your construction environments, your healthcare environments, what have you. Universal design should be the North Star guiding future tools. It doesn't change, whether with AI or with a new tool that you're going to implement, a new line you're going to implement, a new process you're going to implement. It needs to be the North Star guiding future tools, policies, and workplaces. And a few key things to remember, in my opinion. Explainable AI. Use models that can justify their predictions in human understandable terms. Remember, the human is part of the system. Bobbie, I remember teaching you teaching me this very early on my career, right? Human is part of the system. So make sure you take that into account. Role-based interfaces, customized views for who's going to use it and in what capacity. So like frontline workers, supervisors, and executives, role-based interfaces, something to keep in mind. Feedback loops allow users to flag incorrect predictions that the AI is giving you or provide input to improve that model accuracy. Cannot forget that. And mobile optimization. Ensure tools are usable in the field and not just in the control rooms, right? When in a control setting, things will work perfectly. And there are a lot of things that you can't predict till you come out in the field. So, be flexible, be mindful, try and kind of do that risk assessment upfront, but also be ready to make changes as things start getting implemented. So I spoke a lot, Bobbie. So tell me this. What's the call to action for ergonomics human factors community? More specifically, how do we see universal design principles evolve with AI integration in future of work?
So for me, I think a big call to action for our profession, since we're in the business of optimizing interaction of the human in their work environment, it speaks to what you've already said. It's to recognize and implement universal design principles as much as possible and ensuring that we're keeping the user centered in everything and understanding that it's not just one user, it's not just that average user, it is multiple people with different needs. So as I mentioned before, we as a society still have a long way to go in making our society more inclusive through the removal of barriers to accessibility. And honestly, this is a great opportunity for us as ergonomists and human factors professionals to toot our horn and show our value. And so we can help with that, especially as we design working products and experiences. I keep throwing that in because it's like that whole experience. So as we design that, we can actually play a role in that for workers and end users. So what's your call to action?
Well, I agree with everything you said, right? But when we embed universal design into everything, the apps we use, the factories we build, the hospitals we staff, the construction sites we, work on, we are not just improving accessibility. We are improving performance, safety, and longevity for everyone. Universal design isn't about accommodation. I know it's like comes out pretty harsh, but it really isn't about accommodation. It's about designing excellence into our systems so people can thrive, stay healthier longer, and continue contributing their best work.
I think that's a great place to end it there. So it was a pleasure to do this podcast with you. I think we can go on and on. I love talking about it. I love going through the different examples, and I love how you bring your experience and put it into real world terms. So hopefully those that are listening got something out of that.
Awesome. Thank you, Bobbie.
A big thank you to our guests, Bobbie Watts and Anuja Patil, for sharing their insights and examples on how universal design creates safer, more effective, and more inclusive environments. And remember, October is National Ergonomics Month, a time to highlight the impact that human factors and ergonomics professionals make every day. If you want to learn more, connect with the Applied Ergonomics Society through IISE. See our show notes for more information. Thanks for listening to Problem Solved, the IISE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the show. And join us next time as we continue exploring how every great solution is a story worth telling.